Good morning, I'm Father X. In episode 11, we're getting you ready for your child custody trial. Now, we'll talk about the parents' mental and emotional stability, and their physical disabilities and mental health. Mental and emotional stability and the mental health of the parents are related best interest factors, and the first one can be a symptom of the second one. I discuss them separately because a parent can have mental and emotional instability without having a psychiatric illness. The unstable behavior by itself isn't in the best interest of the child, but a psychiatric illness is more proof of the risks to the child. So you don't have to prove she has a mental illness. You just have to prove that her symptoms and behaviors are detrimental to the best interests of the child. If you prove she has a diagnosed mental health issue, then that's just extra. Why does this topic matter? If you're in a high-conflict child custody case like I was in, there's a significant possibility that one or both parents have mental health issues. While I lived with my son's mother, we went to 3 couples counselors because of the mother's violence, anger management problems, and threats to end her life. I had to do research and work with our therapists to identify the correct diagnosis so we could try to fix the problem. When we went to court, I realized the family court practitioners were totally clueless about bipolar and borderline personality disorders. The judge was blindly stuck on the idea that the mom gets default custody, no matter what. I had to turn the judge completely around with my testimony on the mother's mental health issues. It's crucial you get this testimony correct to make the judge understand the actual best interests of your child. That's hard to do in a high-conflict case because of the intense emotions and the false allegations flying around. So in this episode, I'll get you prepared to testify about the other parent's mental health issues. Let's get to it. Mental and emotional stability. It's in the worst interest of the child to primarily live with a mentally unstable parent. For mental and emotional instability, I'll cover 3 key areas: anger management problems, including physical violence, depression and threats to end their own life, extreme mood swings. A child will always gravitate toward the sane parent. We discussed the psychological impact on the child in episode 11C. A child needs emotional stability from their parent. Imagine a child walking on eggshells daily due to the mother's instability. Imagine the constant stress on the child as they navigate that home environment with an adult that overpowers them. If this applies to your case, then show with testimony and evidence that the other parent is emotionally unstable. Here are some questions to help you prepare your testimony, and these questions apply to both parents. Anger management problems. How often does the other parent explode in anger? Every day, 3 times a week, 3 times a month, or once a year? Testify about the frequency because it shows the home environment the child would be in if they primarily lived with that other parent. What are examples of her anger management problems? Describe her behavior. You can't just say the mom has anger issues. You need to tell stories of her anger, especially stories where she's out of control and her anger is unjustified or destructive. You have to make the judge live in your shoes and understand the reality of what life would be like for your children if they were forced to live with her. How has the parent's behavior impacted your child? Is the child scared, confused, or frustrated because of the other parent? Give clear examples. Be aware. Anger is a normal human emotion resulting from fear, frustration, or pain. However, an anger management problem is a more serious issue because the person gets angry frequently. They hurt others verbally or physically. Their anger is out of control, and small, petty things make them angry. For example, I testified in detail about how my son's mother erupted in anger about 3 times a week and was verbally fighting for 3 to 5 hours each of those times. Her anger constantly filled our home with toxic venom. There could never be any peace in our home. Giving primary custody to the mother was only in the best interests of the mother. Let's discuss depression. Is she suffering from depression? What are her signs of depression? Describe her behavior. Does she have problems leaving the home or functioning? Is she emotionally disconnected from the children? If so, what examples can you provide to make this real for the judge? Did she make any threats to end her life? Describe those occasions. How did it impact the children? Express your concerns that if this single mother is alone with your infant and follows through on her threats, the infant could be left unattended, risking starvation or dehydration. Older children might become the mother's emotional caretakers, which is detrimental to their well-being. Mood swings. With extreme mood swings, tell the stories of how mom goes from happiness to anger and back at a moment's notice, leaving you and the kids confused or scared about what's happening. Talk about how this behavior affects your kids. Remember, the child will gravitate toward the sane parent. Are you concerned your kids won't do well in school because they often have to worry about mom's mood swings? Then say so. Giving primary custody to the mother is only in the best interests of the mother. Now, let's discuss the second best interest factor, disability, the physical and mental health of the parents. A parent's physical disability only matters if it prevents them from caring for the child. Is that true in your case? Explain it. Even with a broken arm, for example, you can care for your child and play with them. So this factor matters in more extreme cases, like if the parent is in a coma, or if your child is a bottle-feeding infant, but the parent is paralyzed from the neck down. Let's discuss mental health, behaviors and symptoms, diagnosis, and medication. First, we'll cover behaviors and symptoms. Here are some questions you can ask to prepare your testimony. Do their behaviors reflect anger management problems, volatile mood swings, threats to hurt themselves or others, hallucinations, distorting reality, depression, or other serious issues? How is this risky for the child's safety and psychological or educational development? Go to Google and find articles about how a parent's mental health issues impact a child's development. Read articles written by psychologists or psychiatrists, not articles written by random people. Diagnosis. Whether there is or is not an official diagnosis, discuss that, but focus more on the patterns of behavior and the risks to the child. Here are some questions you can ask to prepare your testimony, and remember that all these questions go both ways for each parent. Has the mother ever been in therapy or under a psychiatrist's care? Name the therapist and state the approximate dates she was in treatment. Why was she seeking therapeutic help? To the best of your knowledge. How do you know all this? Did she tell you? Has the other parent been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, such as bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, schizophrenia, etc.? How do you know? If there's no diagnosis yet, are you in the process of evaluating to see if there is a diagnosis? Are you concerned the other parent may have an undiagnosed illness? What behaviors do they engage in to make you believe that? Are these behaviors so bad that a neutral person would think we need an official diagnosis by a professional? Go to Google and read articles by psychologists on these psychiatric illnesses. Look up these illnesses online in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, written by the American Psychiatric Association. Unfortunately, judges in family court are usually clueless about mental health issues, so you must become knowledgeable about identifying, understanding, and treating these illnesses, because it's your kid's future at stake. You aren't a medical expert, so you can't testify like a doctor who can certify her illness. But as the child's father and a witness to mom's behaviors, you can express your concerns about her diagnosed or undiagnosed illness. If your situation involves mental illness, you might want to request a forensic psychologist to evaluate the parents. You can present the patterns of behavior to help this evaluator identify an underlying mental health issue. An honest and competent evaluator can recognize this. And then you and the forensic evaluator can tell the judge, The mother's mental health issue is bad for the child. This means you can't blindly rubber stamp custody for the mother. However, court experts can pose a risk. Many family court practitioners are lazy when thinking about psychiatric diagnosis. They think a psychologist can meet the mother for 1 or 2 hours, and then that psychologist can somehow provide an accurate diagnosis to the court. That's 100% wrong. You can't diagnose borderline personality disorder, for example, with a blood test or see it on somebody's face. A real evaluation requires meeting a person for several hours over weeks or months, and it requires input from people close to the mother, like the father, children, family members, etc. That's how a psychologist learns about the mother's true behaviors and symptoms, because she may never admit to violent outbursts or anger issues. A legitimate evaluation must include both parents plus others who can talk about the behaviors. In court, you can tear apart inadequate evaluations by asking, in your evaluation, how did you account for the mother's 5 violent outbursts? How did you consider the 7 times the mother threatened to end her life? Ask about other material topics the psychologist ignored. If that psychologist can't show they knew these facts, it means they produced garbage analysis. Testify that your children's future should not be based on incomplete analysis. Medication. Let's talk about medication. Here are some questions you can ask to prepare your testimony. Is the other parent on medication for mental health issues? Do they take medication routinely or skip it? How do you know? Is therapy or medication having an impact on their behaviors? Describe their behavior before and after their therapy or medication to see if there's any improvement. If there's not, say it's not working. If she's on medication for mental health issues, go to webmd.com or the Food and Drug Administration's website at fda.gov or the National Institutes of Health website at nih.gov. Enter the name of the medication and print out what the medicine is normally used for to show the court. Assume nobody in court has any clue about what any medication is or what it's used for. You'll have to explain it to them. You're not a medical expert, but you can state your concern that she's taking antipsychotic medication, for example. Also, I learned a crucial difference between bipolar and borderline personality disorders, despite their similar symptoms. Bipolar disorder involves a chemical imbalance, treatable with medication. But borderline is a personality disorder that requires behavior therapy. Medicine doesn't fix borderlines. This difference is huge, because if a borderline mother is treated with bipolar medication, it won't fix the problem. Wrong problem, wrong solution. Family court is lazy and will assume that if she is taking any medication, it will magically fix everything, which is totally wrong. You need the correct diagnosis and the correct solution, because the next 18 years of co-parenting and child raising depend on it. Let's discuss your testimony strategy. In summary, first, you state what her behaviors are, because you witnessed them. Second, you can state how you're concerned that those behaviors are in the worst interests of the child. Third, you can state your concern that you had conversations with a psychologist, or you're concerned that the mother has a diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health issue. If it's not fixed, her behavior will continue. I keep using the word concern because you can testify factually that you have a concern. The trick is that you should not play the role of a psychologist or act like you can diagnose her. And if you have a real concern based on mom's actions, then the judge should have a concern, unless they're acting in the worst interests of the child. The wrong way to testify is to simply declare, "She's insane. I know she's bipolar. I looked it up online." Or, "He only thinks about himself. He's a narcissist." None of that is credible because you aren't a licensed psychologist. The problem with parents diagnosing each other is that with borderline personality disorder, for example, a person must have like 6 out of 9 symptoms to be diagnosed with it. and the frequency and severity of the symptoms matter. Only licensed medical professionals can diagnose because they know the depth and nuance of the behavior required for diagnosis. I myself had to be careful testifying about the mother's borderline personality disorder so that I didn't come across as a person just making random accusations. First, I told many detailed stories to show the mother's anger management problems, her violent outbursts, her extreme mood swings, her threats to end her life, and more. For each symptom, I had many examples to show the patterns. Her behaviors alone may have been enough to prove it wasn't in the best interests of our son to be primarily raised by an emotionally unstable mother. But I didn't stop there, and I walked into dangerous territory. I had to. The mother and I had 3 couples counselors while we lived together. The first one told me the mother had borderline personality disorder, but then that first psychologist refused to testify in court or talk to the forensic evaluator. She wanted nothing to do with any court proceedings. So I was the one testifying that the mother was borderline, and the mother was accusing me of diagnosing her by myself. But I couldn't quote anything this first therapist said because that would be hearsay. Hearsay gets complicated, but it's when you quote another person who's not part of the trial and they can't be cross-examined. So I testified that I had some one-on-one meetings with this psychologist and how, as a result of those meetings, I researched fear of abandonment because my son's mother told both of us she had that. Then I learned fear of abandonment was closely linked to borderline personality disorder, and I realized the symptoms of borderline personality disorder closely matched the behaviors of my son's mother. I testified that when I realized this, I went back to that psychologist to confirm if this really was borderline personality disorder or if I was wrong. And without quoting that psychologist, because that would be hearsay, I testified that when she gave me her answer, I felt demoralized and frustrated because I knew the mother's borderline personality disorder would be very difficult to deal with. Do you see how that story shows I was working with a psychologist and not just making up a random diagnosis? Do you see how I avoided hearsay? I showed the psychologist's confirmation by testifying about my disappointed reaction instead of quoting her. It was clear this doctor confirmed the diagnosis. For dads in an abusive relationship, couples therapy is crucial for 2 reasons. First, the therapist may help fix the problem. Second, if the therapist can't fix the problem and later you go to court, then the therapist can be a neutral witness to testify about the reality of the circumstance, to counteract the gender bias of your judge. Even if you attend therapy alone during the relationship to address the mother's abuse, having a therapist as a witness is better than no witness at all. In my case, luckily, 2 of our 3 counselors spoke to the forensic evaluator. To get you thinking deeper, I'll share thoughts on different mental disorders and how they might impact child custody. This is not scientific. It's just my general opinion. The reality depends on your specific circumstances, and I want you thinking about this. Look up these disorders online in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5, written by the American Psychiatric Association. Adjustment disorder. If a parent is in therapy to manage anxiety from a short-term, stressful situation, such as an abusive wife or the stress of a divorce, I think those issues are common and only temporary, so this should not impact custody, especially if it doesn't affect the child. If a parent has Asperger's, autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I don't think these issues create physical or psychological risk to the child, depending on the extremity. And I think these parents could be equal or primary parents, but honestly, I don't have much experience with these, so you should research them. Let's say a parent has bipolar or borderline personality disorder with symptoms we discussed earlier. I think borderlines pose an ongoing physical and psychological threat to a child's well-being. Borderlines should have far less than 50-50 custody. Bipolar disorder might be alleviated with medication, but if they stop taking medication, then they're a risk to the children. So I think they should also be non-custodial alternate weekend parents. If a parent has other psychotic disorders like schizophrenia, where you hear voices or you think blue giraffes are running around in your bathroom, then you need medication. If you stop taking medication, then you're in instant danger to your child, and nobody is there to protect the kid. I think these parents should be the non-custodial part-time parent to minimize the risk to the kids. But again, it all depends on the total circumstance, not just one fact. Now we've covered two major best interest factors that are common in high conflict custody cases. In the next episodes, we'll discuss additional factors so you can learn what to talk about and how to put it together for your judge. These might be the darkest days of your life. They were for me. I'm making these educational videos to help you navigate this nightmare. If you subscribe, you can get updates when I post more videos. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing with your friends who are in a similar situation. Please support this channel so I can make more videos. You can donate via my YouTube channel's About page using PayPal or Venmo.